Imagine I hand you $5,000 in cash right now, but with one strict condition: you can only spend it on lenses. What would be your move? Would you buy the Zoom Holy Trinity? You get the 1635, the 2470, and the 7200 millimeters? Or do you take the same $5,000 and invest it in a carefully selected set of prime lenses, maybe 35, 50, and 80 millimeter? I'm not giving you a choice of how you're filling your camera bag. It's more like a fork in the road of your development as photographer. One part is engineered for convenience, it makes you sure that you get a shot. The other part is forcing you to master how you see and work with the limitations of your gear. Let's talk about what happens to your photography when you choose the safety and the comfort of the zooms versus the restrictions you're forced to deal with when you're working with primes. If you go online right now and start reading tech forums and drop this question into a Facebook group, you will be bombarded with hundreds of conflicting opinions. You will find yourself drowning in threads trying to figure out what is the perfect combination for you. But there is something critical to understand here. Most of these opinions come from photographers who are still trying to find their way. Many of them are beginners or gear-obsessed hobbyists. They know a thing or two. It even might sound that they know a lot, but working successful photographers rarely get into this online debate. Sometimes they do, but it's a rare thing. They do not engage in the noise because they already know exactly what works for them, and they're out there executing. To understand this lens dilemma, better let's look at the common advice you're going to get out there. The zoom argument is convenience and versatility. The ultimate case for the zoom lens comes down to these two words. A single lens can do several completely different jobs. Take a standard workhorse like the Nikon 24-120 f4. You can shoot almost everything with it. At the 24mm end, you can capture wild landscapes, architecture, and environmental portraits. In the middle, at the 50mm, you're in a sweet spot for everyday documentary work, street photography, and half-body portraits. And when you push it towards the 120mm end, you instantly have a tool for tight headshots, fashion, and perhaps fine art. The only real limitation with a lens like that is the fixed aperture of f4. But if you have a decent lighting, it covers an endless variety of subjects. It's a highly regarded lens. Then there is the legendary 7200. There is almost a cult of photographers who refuse to leave the house without it. Nearly every wedding photographer, event shooter, sports photographer, and photojournalist will have one of these in their arsenal. Then you have the ultra-wide zooms, typically sitting around 60 to 35mm range. These are great for landscape, interior architecture, and real estate photography, who needs to pull as much of possible physical space into the frame as possible. If you need to make a small room look massive or capture an entire mountain range on a single frame, ultra-wides give you a perspective that your own eyes can't naturally see. So if you took these $5,000 and spent it entirely on zooms, you're in a good company. The technical arguments against zoom lenses usually comes down to weight, maximum aperture, and extreme sharpness. Historically, you rarely see a professional zoom open wider than f2.8. While there are a few heavy f2 zooms on the market right now, the f2.8 still remains the industry standard. In terms of sharpness, modern high-end zooms have narrowed the gap significantly. They are as nearly as sharp as primes. But to get to that performance, you will need to pay a premium price. Professional zooms are complex, expensive, and heavy. If you try to shortcut this by buying all-in-one super zoom like 28-300, you run straight into massive technological compromises. To give you that much of range in one barrel, the manufacturer have to sacrifice low light performance, accept heavy image distortions, and give up edge-to-edge sharpness. It's not the end of the world for the casual traveler, but it's exactly why you rarely see a professional photographer pull one of these from his bag. Now let's talk about primes. The technical reason to choose fast prime comes down to three things: low light performance, bokeh, and unique optical rendering. To someone new to gear, f1.2 and f2.8 might sound like they're very close on paper, but the physics tell a completely different story. An f1.2 lens allows 5.4 times or over 500% more light to reach your camera sensor compared to an f2.8 lens under the exact identical conditions. That is a massive difference. Think that a photograph shot at f1.2 with ISO 800 gets pushed to ISO 5000 if your lens is limited to f2.8. It means that the difference between a clean image and a noisy one. Yes, you can fix a lot of that in post, but some image quality will be sacrificed. Then there is the bokeh. With a fast prime, the background blur circles are larger, the depth of field is incredibly thin, and the transition from your sharp subject to the blurry background is beautifully soft. A f1.2 lens creates a creamy, pentily effect that melts away distractions. when a f2.8 can often look busy, hard-edged, or distracting. Of course, it depends on the exact lens, your focal length, and your distance to the subject, but those are the basic behavior differences when it comes to background blur. Just like zooms, primes have their own legendary lineup. You have the ultimate trinity of fast glass. The 35mm f1.2, which is great for environmental portraits, photojournalism, or street photography in weddings. The 50mm f1.2, which is the classic choice for lifestyle photography, street and half-body portraits. And the 85mm f1.2, the undisputed king for dedicated portrait photography and headshots. And I will throw another one in the basket. It's the 135mm f1.8, which is mostly used for ultra-tight headshots, stage performances, and outdoor fashion where you want to completely isolate the subject from the background. Photographers don't choose these prime lenses for their sharpness and low light performance. They mostly go for their character, for how reality looks when it's rendered through that specific glass. But the trade-off of a prime lens is obvious. It's versatility. You're looking into a single focal length. Unless you're shooting a very predictable subject, it can be a serious hassle to constantly swap lenses in the field, the risk of getting dust on your sensor, or be forced to carry 2-3 heavy camera bodies on your shoulders just to have these different fields of view ready. Because of all of this that we talk about, the standard advice that you will hear in these forums is to compromise. Buy a few versatile zooms for your day-to-day work, and keep 1-2 fast primes in your bag, specifically for low light and shallow depth of field situations. And that's where 99% of the videos and forum threads on this topic end. You will hear a lot of use this and use that, and I use this and that, but bottom line, they will give you the specs, they will weigh the convenience against low light, and they will send you shopping. But these advices are missing one important point. The real difference between a zoom and a prime is not technical. It seems technical, but in fact it's psychological. It is about subconscious habits that you build, how you behave on while photographing, and how the glass you attach to your camera completely changes how you see the world. Let's talk about what actually happens to your habits when you're shooting with a zoom versus a prime. If you choose to shoot predominantly with zoom lenses, a few subtle behavior shifts happen to you without you even realizing it. First, you tend to cheat the focal range. If you look at the metadata of photographers who use the 7200 very often, you will find that they shoot the vast majority of their work at the absolute widest or absolute tightest ends, right at the 70mm or right at 200mm, and very little in between. This directly infects your shooting style. When you see something happening, you stand still, zoom fully in or fully out, and if the frame doesn't work instantly, you just walk away. Which brings us to the second side effect. You stop exploring the scene with your body. Instead of moving to find a better perspective, you explore the scene entirely with your zoom ring. Now, I'm not saying that specifically you do this, you might be fantastic at working your angles with a zoom lens, but the general psychological tendency toward physical laziness is a direct byproduct of using a zoom lens. Third, it breeds sloppier composition. This comes down to personality. A photographer who chooses convenience in their gear will often choose convenience in their post-processing. They develop a habit of shooting loose and fixing mistakes or cropping in front of a computer screen later, rather than doing the hard work out there in the field. They just put a lot of the responsibility of their shoot on their gear. Fourth one is that you lose visual consistency. A lens is a sort of a paintbrush. Using one type of a brush gives you a signature, cohesive look to a body of work. A zoom lens introduces a massive variety of compression and perspective variation, which makes it harder to feel your style. Many photographers think that they can cover up the latter by applying a uniform color palette or press it in Lightroom, but that's how it looks on the surface. The visual consistency, the mark of the master brush, comes from mastering a single perspective. Finally, zooms give you too many options. If you're in a studio or a completely controlled environment, that is fine, but if you're out there in the wild or on the street, your brain is consistently forced to scan reality across an infinite spectrum, from a wide 24mm to a compressed 70mm. It is all different story. There's a lot of data to process. For an experienced professional, that might be less of an issue because he has already developed sort of a visual muscle memory and can recognize potential opportunities. But for someone who is beginning to running through all these zooms all the time and analyze what's happening here, what's happening a little bit further, and what's happening back down, it can be a very tiring work and a very confusing work. So for someone at the beginning of their journey, it adds unnecessary noise and confusion to an already difficult creative process. A prime lens, on the other hand, operates under strict rules. And limitation is the fastest road to discipline. Over time, a prime lens will teach you how to understand physical distance intuitively. It forces you to explore angles. Because guess what? If you already have to take 5 steps towards to your subject to get the right framing, there is no mental friction that's stopping you from taking 2 extra steps to the side to check a different angle. Because you're already moving, you become hyper aware of your environment. These physical limitations force you to compose with intent. If I had to choose what to recommend to someone in their first few years of photography, I would undoubtedly point them towards a prime lens. In fact, I recommend my students to stick to one single focal length for at least 2 whole years. They all thank me for that later. Now let's be crystal clear. I am not saying zoom lenses are bad. You can absolutely learn photography using them, but they introduce more background noise into your learning curve. I use zoom occasionally. On days when I know that I need absolute versatility, I'll throw a zoom on my camera. But even then, my behavior is different. I will set manually the zoom ring to a specific focal length, and then I will walk and explore the scene with my feet, not by twisting the glass. If I need to change the focal length, I'll just change it and continue doing the same. To put all these zoom lenses vs prime into perspective, look at the legends. When Steve McCurry was asked in an interview which single lens he would choose if you could have only one, his answer was clear, the 2470 f2.8. But if you look closer at his history, during his film days and his formative years of his career, McCurry relied heavily on primes, specifically 35mm, 50mm, 85mm, and his iconic portrait of the Afghan girl wasn't shot on a zoom, it was made using a manual focus Nikon 105mm prime. The vast majority of the classic work that built his legendary status was captured on 35 or 50mm. He spent roughly 27 years shooting strictly with fixed prime lenses before making the ultimate switch to zoom. It was only later, during the modern digital era, that McCurry transitioned to versatile zooms like 2470 f2.8 or the Leica's 2490 for the pure convenience of travel. He earned the right to use zoom because his eye has already been trained by decades of prime discipline. He already knew how to see before he even touched that zoom ring. Similarly, Sebastião Salgado. In his early days, he typically worked with a minimal kit of just 3 primes, 28mm, 35mm, and 50mm. He used this fast, lightweight setup to document rural Latin American culture in early humanitarian assignments, culminating in his famous book Other Americans. Only after 30 years with primes, in 2004, he started using some of Canon's series L-glass zoom lenses, mostly 2470, 7200, and 24105. So if it works for Sebastião Salgado and Steve McCurry, it will work for us. But first, master composition with primes, then move to zooms. I hope it was helpful. I hope I managed to sort out the understanding of which type of lens will be better for you. If there are remaining questions, welcome to share them in the comments. Otherwise, happy shooting. See you next time.